Contrary to the Kremlin's narrative that the Russian army is relentlessly advancing on the front and will capture Kiev and Lviv any day now, even Ukraine skeptics like Donald Trump have realized as the war enters its fourth year that Ukraine is now more likely to emerge victorious. Israeli historian and publicist Yuval Noah Harari writes about this in the Financial Times. He recalls that the clear goal of the all-out Russian invasion in February 2022 was the complete subjugation of Ukraine and the elimination of its state sovereignty. However, today Russia controls less Ukrainian territory than it did in August 2022 and has yet to capture a single strategically important city, such as Kharkiv or Kiev. Harari compares Russia's insane losses with minimal territorial gains to the successes of armies in World War I and draws an analogy with the American invasion of Iraq in 2003. It's as if more than 3 years after the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the US had only managed to capture 20% of the country, suffering 1 million casualties. Would anyone consider that an American victory? The author of the article asks rhetorically. Harari notes that Russia is unable to achieve a decisive turnaround not only on land. At sea, Ukrainian drones and missiles have driven Russian ships into the most remote accessible bay, and in the air, Russian aircraft are afraid to fly, even close to the front line. For comparison, the Israeli historian cites Israel's 12-day war against Iran in June of this year, when Israeli air forces established complete control over Iranian skies in about 36 hours without losing a single aircraft. Another telling point the author of the publication points out: in this war, there was only one instance of a foreign army intervening in the fighting, and that was the DPRK, which assisted Russia. Meanwhile, Ukraine, although receiving material aid from the West, was always forced to fight on its own. Harari recalls that in the first months of the war, Ukraine fought back almost exclusively with its own weapons because the West was afraid to provide anything more than helmets. He is convinced that Ukraine would have achieved a complete military victory in 2022 or 2023 if it had received everything it needed immediately before Russia geared its army and economy for a full-scale war. The author of the article criticizes the West for cowardice and indecisiveness even in situations where their own borders are at stake, as in the case of Russian drones and aircraft in NATO airspace. If Russia attacks Europe tomorrow and the US decides not to intervene in the fighting, Europe's greatest military asset will be the Ukrainian army. The American military also has much to learn from Ukraine's combat experience and its advanced weapons industry. This is likely one of the reasons why President Trump has recently become more supportive of Ukraine. He likes to support victors. The historian concludes,
So you're booking your flight, and just when you're about to check out, the airline asks if you'd like to pay a little something to offset your share of the flight's pollution. Or, maybe you're an environmentally minded person, and you've heard you can buy these things called carbon offsets. Are they worth it? Let's explore. Why planes are so pollutive. According to Associated Press, a round-trip flight from New York to Los Angeles emits more than 1,300 pounds of planet-warming carbon dioxide per passenger, according to an emissions calculator from the International Civil Aviation Organization. That's about the amount of pollution you'd save if you swore off meat for 17 months. Jet engines burn fossil fuels, releasing planet-warming gases into the atmosphere. They also release water vapor, which turns into long, thin clouds called contrails that trap heat instead of letting it escape to space. Additional warming that isn't typically included in a flight's emissions, said Diane Vitry, aviation director at a clean energy advocacy organization called the European Federation for Transport and Environment. Reducing emissions from air travel is difficult. Batteries weigh too much and provide too little power for long flights. Sustainable aviation fuel, biofuels made from things like corn, oil seeds, and algae that can be mixed with jet fuel, is currently more expensive than traditional fuel and lacking sufficient supply to be in wide use. Aviation is the problem child, Vitry said. Aviation and shipping are not decarbonizing, and definitely not fast enough. That's where carbon offsets come in. What is a carbon offset? A carbon offset is a certificate or a permit to emit planet-warming gases. It's connected to something that stores or reduces carbon emissions, for example, planting trees, or funding renewable energy.
A rule of thumb is that a mile traveled on average in an airplane is about equal to a mile traveled in a gasoline vehicle. And if you think about it, you know, how much do you drive and how much do you fly? You fly longer distances. So it's very easy for air travel to overwhelm your greenhouse gas emissions on a personal level.
We often talk about the hidden side of aviation's climate impact is all the other emissions, and most notably are the contrails, the white lines in the sky. They may seem beautiful, but actually they are very, very bad for the environment, and that we can say that up to doubles the aviation's climate impact. So we're actually talking about kind of nearly 5% of kind of global warming is aviation induced.
My recommendation is always don't buy carbon offsets that you haven't vetted carefully. There's so much overcrediting on the offset market, so many credits that either don't represent any emissions reductions at all or represent just a small fraction of what they claim. And so my suggestion is always, you know, number one, the most important thing is reduce your emissions in some way. So fly less, and then, you know, travel wisely, like use public transportation, bicycle, electric vehicle rather than gas vehicle, electrify your home, purchase 100% renewables if you can, eat less red meat, like all of those things that can reduce your own emissions. That's always the most important thing.